You don't make laws banning things that don't exist. You only make a law when something is happening. Not just happening, but happening so often that the emperor himself has to step in and say, enough.
Hey there, friend. Pull up a chair. Get comfortable. Imagine we're in my favorite place. It's a study, lined with old books. Can you smell that? It's my favorite smell in the world. Old paper, a hint of leather, and the faint, sweet scent of wood smoke from the fire. The world outside is busy, you know? It's loud and fast. But in here, it's just you and me, and it's quiet. This is where I find the best stories. Not the ones shouted on the news, but the ones that whisper. Tonight, I have one of those stories for you. One that's been whispering to me for months. It's been buried on purpose, tucked away like an old family secret nobody wants to talk about. This is the Veiled Arena, a personal journey for Rome's Gladiatrix. And this isn't just a history lesson. This journey, it felt personal. So let's take it slow. Let's uncover this together. You know, I've always been hooked on the what-ifs of history, the stuff that doesn't make it into the textbooks. The official record, it always feels a little too neat, doesn't it? I spend a lot of my nights digging. That's what I do. I dig through digital archives, looking for the cracks, the contradictions, the lines that just don't add up. And a while back, I found a crack, a big one. It started with a whisper, a single word I'd never seen before, Gladiatrix. Yeah, you heard that right, Gladiatrix, the female version of gladiator. My first thought was, that can't be right. That's probably just a modern fantasy thing, because if female gladiators were real, wouldn't we know? Weren't all the gladiators men, like Spartacus? But the whisper got louder. I found a name etched on a stone I hadn't even seen yet. A name like Achillea. Achillea? Who was Achillea? Suddenly, this wasn't just research. It was a hunt. Why would an empire go to so much trouble to bury the stories of these women? What were they so afraid of? So, this invitation tonight, it's not just to listen to a story. It's an invitation to join me on this investigation. Let's find out who Achillea was. Let's find out what happened.
Okay, so where do we start? We start with the smoking gun. This is the moment that hooked me. This is the piece of paper that made me sit up straight in my chair and say, whoa, okay, this is real. I'm scrolling through digital archives of Roman law, and let me tell you, that stuff is dry. It's as boring as it sounds. And then I find it. A decree from the year 200 AD. The emperor, a guy named Septimius Severus, issues an order. And in that order, there's a line. He officially bans women from fighting in the arena. I had to read it again and again. Ban women from fighting. Now, let's think about this. You don't make laws banning things that don't exist, right? You don't see a government passing an edict, "We hereby ban unicorns from grazing in the public parks." You only make a law when something is happening. Not just happening, but happening so often and getting so out of hand that the emperor himself has to step in and say, "Enough." I pictured him, Septimius Severus. I can almost see him, sitting in his cold marble palace late at night, the flicker of oil lamps on his face. He's not some distant figure. He's a worried politician, dipping his quill, signing that decree with a grim, firm hand. He wasn't banning a myth. He was trying to stop a trend. That single line in a dusty old law book, it's not a law. It's a confession. It's the X on a treasure map. What would you do if you found a map like that? If you found a secret that rewrites a story everyone thinks they know, would you just fold it up and put it away? I couldn't. It gave me chills. It still does. So, my next question was obvious. If this was a thing, where are the stories? Why aren't they in the big Hollywood movies? And that's when I ran face first into the Iron Curtain of history. You see, the history we have, it was all written by a very exclusive club. The greats, guys like Tacitus, Suetonius, Juvenal. And they were all elite, wealthy, conservative men. And I started to read what they had to say. When they did mention women in the arena, the tone was just dripping with disgust, as if they were talking about something deeply, profoundly wrong. They used words like disgraceful, a monstrosity, a sign of decay. They didn't see warriors. They saw a world turned upside down. I realized, in their world, a proper woman had exactly 2 boxes she could fit into: wife or Vestal Virgin. That was it. Manage the home or serve the gods in purity. So where does a gladiatrix fit? A woman who sweats, who bleeds, who kills, who's cheered for by a screaming mob. Where does she fit? She doesn't. She is a contradiction, a threat to their entire social order. And so they wrote her out. It was an active erasure. They labeled her as a freak, a disgrace, and then they just stopped talking. They pulled a curtain of silence across the arena. And for 2,000 years, it worked. This is what gets me so fired up. It's not just about what happened. It's about what was hidden. If they were erased, if the official historians buried them, how do we find them? But before we go hunting for them, I realized I was missing a piece. I had to ask myself why. Why was this the stage? What was so special about the arena that made a woman walking onto its sand so explosive?
So I had to pause my hunt for the Gladiatrix and start a new hunt. I had to understand, what was the arena? I mean, really, we think we know, right? We've all seen the movies. Gladiator, Spartacus, big stadium, guys in helmets, thumbs up, thumbs down. It's sport, right? like an ancient, brutal Super Bowl. That is what I thought, and I was completely wrong. I gotta be honest, what I found next, it chilled me. It's when I truly understood the phrase bread and circuses, panem et circenses. I'd heard the term before, just like you. I thought it just meant free food and a show, a nice perk of being Roman. No, it wasn't a perk. It was a tool, a political weapon, maybe the most brilliant and the most terrifying tool of crowd control ever invented. Let's really picture this. Let's go to the Colosseum. It's not just a stadium. It's a statement. It holds 50,000 people. Some estimates go up to 80,000. And the tickets? They were free. The food? Often free. The emperor, he's there, sitting in the royal box. This wasn't just a game. This was the one place on Earth where the common, everyday Roman could be in the same room as their emperor. They could cheer him. They could boo him. This was the one tiny, controlled place where the mob had a voice. And the emperor, he listened, and he gave them what they wanted. And what they wanted was blood. This wasn't a sport. It was a message of power, a message from the emperor to 50,000 people at once. And that message was, I am the emperor. I am your provider. I can give you free grain, and I can give you death on a scale you cannot even imagine. We focus on the gladiators, the one-on-one duels, but we forget the halftime show. I had to read about this stuff. At lunchtime, at the games, they would hold the noxiae, the public executions. This is the part that gets me. They would tie condemned criminals, prisoners of war, to stakes and just let wild animals loose, lions, bears, leopards, tearing them apart in front of everybody, in front of families. Or they would stage those mythological reenactments. They'd dress a criminal as Hercules and then actually burn him alive on a pyre, just like in the myth. This wasn't entertainment, my friend. This was terror, packaged as a party. This arena, this sand, was the sacred, bloody political heart of the entire empire. It was the temple of Roman virtus, their word for manliness, courage, and power. It was all about control and death and male strength. And that is the stage. That sacred, terrifying, men-only temple of blood and politics that Aquilia and Mevia and those other women decided to walk onto. Now do you understand the scorn from Juvenal? Now do you see why the historians were so furious? It wasn't just, oh, that's not ladylike. It was, you are desecrating our holiest site. It was, you are spitting on the very core of Roman power. When I realized that, I knew I was onto something huge. So, let's sit with that for a minute. The fire's burning low in the hearth. We've done it. In this first part of our journey, we've found the confession from the emperor, that single line in a law book that proves something was happening. We've unmasked the iron curtain of shame and mockery, and we've seen why the elite historians were so desperate to bury the story. And now we understand the stage. We understand the sheer, explosive audacity it took for a woman to even think about stepping onto that sand. But all of this, the law, the shame, the politics, it's all still just talk. It's paper and theories and my own rambling by this fireside. Where are The women? I mean, really? Where is the proof? If the paper was burned, if the stories were shamed into silence, where else could a story survive? I went back to my research, and I thought, a voice can be silenced. Paper can be burned. But you can't silence stone. Next time, on the Veiled Arena, we go to the British Museum, and we finally meet Achillea.
Hey there, friend. Welcome back. If you're picking up where we left off, pull up that chair again. The fire's still crackling, and I've got a fresh pot of coffee brewing. Or tea, if that's your thing. Last time, we uncovered the Whisper, that shocking edict from Emperor Severus that basically confessed everything. We pulled back the Iron Curtain, saw how history tried to bury these women in shame, and we set the stage. We learned what the arena truly was, the sacred, terrifying, political heart of Rome. But that was all talk, paper, theories. I ended last time with a promise that we were done with theories and we were going to find the proof, real, touchable proof. I remember the night I dove into this part. Fire low, shadows dancing on my bookshelves. My heart was racing a little, like I was about to meet these women face to face. This is episode 2 of The Veiled Arena, The Stone and the Scorn. Let's keep it slow. Keep listening to those whispers, because what we're about to find, it's going to change how you see ancient Rome.
So, our hunt doesn't start in the grand ruins of Rome. Not yet. It takes us, in our minds, to a quiet, softly lit hall in the British Museum in London. Picture it with me. The air's cool and still, with that faint museum scent of polished stone and history preserved under glass. Crowds murmur in the background, but in this corner, it's almost silent. And there, standing unassumingly against the wall, is a piece of marble. It's a relief sculpture, about the size of a large painting, dug up from Halicarnassus, an ancient city in what's now Turkey. When I first pulled up a high-res photo of it on my screen, late at night, fire popping softly, I just stared for minutes. It felt like the stone was staring back. Let me paint the picture for you. It's a scene of combat frozen in time. 2 figures face off, poised and ready. They're kitted out like pros. Round shields, grip tight, short swords, and greaves protecting their legs. Their bodies are tense, muscles etched in the marble, strong, athletic, unyielding. But here's the detail that stops you cold. No helmets. Their faces are bare, hair flowing freely, expressions fierce and focused. And trust me, we will circle back to why that's so important later. It's a chilling clue. But the part that made my heart skip, the inscriptions, carved right above their heads. One says Achillea, the other Amazonia. I mean, come on, let's just sit with those names for a second. These aren't everyday Roman names like Julia or Claudia. These are stage names, personas crafted for the spotlight. Amazonia, evoking the legendary warrior women of myth. Achillea, a feminine twist on Achilles, the invincible Greek hero. You can almost hear the roar of the arena, can't you? The stomp of feet on wooden benches, the chants building A-M-A, Zonia, A-C-H-I-L-I-A. And there's one more inscription, etched at the bottom, Missy, short for Stans Missy, Latin for sent away standing. In the brutal world of the games, this was rare. It meant a draw. Both fighters so skilled, so evenly matched, that the crowd demanded they both live to fight another day. They walked out of that sand alive. This stone, it's not a gravestone, cold and final. It's a commemoration. It's a poster celebrating a legendary bout, Ali versus Fraser, but with swords. When I found this, zooming in on every carve and crack, I felt this rush of vindication. Like, yes, this is it. I wasn't chasing shadows. These women weren't fantasies. They were superstars. But it also raises questions, doesn't it? If they were this famous, why the silence from the big historians? Oh, well, that brings us to the paper trail.
So, with that stone burning in my mind, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place, I turned back to the historians. Back to the Iron Curtain Club, Juvenile, Tacitus. This time, I was hunting for what they did say. And oh boy, did I find it. It turns out they weren't quiet. But the way they talked, it wasn't in the grand annals of empire. Now, these mentions were tucked into their satires, their biting commentaries, their angry rants. I can just picture Juvenile, this satirical poet holed up in a cramped Rome apartment, quill in hand, face twisted in anger, scribbling his rants by flickering candlelight. He's basically the original angry blogger. And in his satires, he zeroes in on women like our Gladiatrix as prime examples of moral decay. He describes with this venomous sarcasm a noblewoman named Mavia hunting boars in the arena with a spear in her hand, her breasts bare for all to see. Or another elite lady practicing at the Ludus, the gladiator school, sweating under a heavy helmet, thrusting at a wooden post. His words are sharp, mocking, full of disgust. Disgraceful, he calls it, a monstrosity. Then there's Tacitus, the serious historian. He slips in a mention, almost like he's embarrassed, of a disgraceful spectacle in 63 AD under Nero, where women of high rank degraded themselves by appearing in the arena. Degraded, that's the word he uses. Do you hear that tone, that undercurrent of offense? It's not neutral history, it's personal. So we know they were superstars, and we know they were scandals from the paper. But was that it? Was it just one famous stone and a few angry poets? Or was there more? I had to know. And what I found is that the evidence wasn't just in one museum, it was everywhere.
I gotta admit, for a while, I thought that Halicarnassus stone was it. The 1 in a million survival, the single piece of proof. But then I started digging in the footnotes, the museum archives, the databases of just stuff that archaeologists have found. And I found the other fragments, the little things, the stuff that's easy to miss, but when you put it all together, it paints a picture. There's this little bronze statuette found in Germany, I think. It's small, maybe just a few inches high, the kind of thing you'd put on your desk. It's a woman in full gladiator gear, and she's holding her sword up in that universal "I won" pose. Her other hand is on her hip. She's not a victim. She's not a monster. She's proud. It wasn't a warning. It was a trophy.
But this next part, this is the part that really got me. The oil lamps. Sounds boring, right? Clay oil lamps, big deal. But think about it. Who bought oil lamps? Everybody. They were the cheap, everyday, disposable items of the Roman world. And archaeologists, they keep finding them in drains, in garbage dumps, in the ruins of everyday homes. Stamped,
with images of female gladiators. This is the aha moment. This changes everything. This wasn't just high art for senators and nobles. This was merchandise. This was the ancient equivalent of buying a poster or a keychain or a coffee mug with your favorite athlete on it. Can you imagine a kid in some small, dusty town in Gaul doing his homework by the light of a lamp featuring a tiny, stamped image of a woman in armor? This proves they weren't just a freak show. They weren't just a scandal. They were popular. They were marketable. They were mainstream. Which brings me back to Juvenal. Back to that angry, sputtering man writing by candlelight. So we've got stars, we've got merch, we've got a popular trend. This makes the anger from those historians even more confusing, doesn't it? If they were so popular, why was he so mad? At first, I thought, he's just a sexist. Simple. But then I remembered what we talked about in episode 1. Remember the heart of the beast? Remember how the arena wasn't just a stadium, it was a temple. It was a temple to Virtus, to manliness, to Roman power. And then it hit me, like a cold splash of water. When a woman, stepped onto that sacred sand, picked up a sword, looked another human in the eye, and also claimed the power of life and death, she wasn't just breaking a social rule. She was committing blasphemy. She was a walking, breathing, living threat to the entire Roman power structure. If a woman could be a warrior, if she could be cheered as a hero for killing, then what else could she be? A general? A governor? An emperor? That's what Juvenal was really screaming about. That's what Tacitus was so disgusted by. It wasn't just unladylike. It was revolutionary. It was terrifying to them. So, let's pause here. The fire's burning low in the hearth. We've done it. We've proven they existed. We have the stone posters. We have the merchandise. And now we know why the elite wanted them gone. We know who they were as a symbol. But we still don't know who they were as people. This is the question that kept me up, staring at the dying embers. Were they all rebellious nobles, like Mevia, spitting in the face of their fathers? Were they all professional superstars, like Aquilia, earning fame and money? Or was there something darker? The answer, my friend, it's a tragedy in 3 acts. Next time, on the Veiled Arena, we meet the 3 faces. Hey there, friend. Welcome back. If you're joining me again, pull up that chair by the fire. It's still crackling away, casting those warm shadows on the walls. Maybe grab a blanket. Tonight's story has a chill to it, you know? The kind that seeps in slow and stays with you. Last time, in episode 2, we touched something real. Cold, hard evidence. We met Aquilia and Amazonia on that ancient stone slab, carved like a poster for the fight of the century. We saw they were superstars, with stage names and fans chanting in the stands. And we felt the scorn dripping from those elite historians like Juvenal, their words twisted with anger and fear. We proved they existed. They were icons. But who were they really, as people? The answer It's a tragedy in 3 acts, each one more layered, more human than the last. This is episode 3 of our mini-series, The Veiled Arena. Tonight, we meet them. We feel their stories. And let me warn you up front, this one's the heart of it all. It's where the emotions hit hardest. So let's take it slow, breathe through it together. Ready?
Let's ease into this with the first face, the one that stirred up a mix of feelings in me, the rebel. You know, when I first tried to wrap my head around her, I had to put myself in her shoes, or rather her sandals, fine leather ones probably, embroidered with gold thread. Let's give her a name for our story, Valeria. Not her real one, but a stand-in for the type of woman those historians like Juvenal loved to rant about. Picture her in the heart of Rome, in a sprawling villa on the Palatine Hill, marble columns gleaming under the sun, fountains tinkling in the courtyard, slaves bustling with trays of figs and wine. She's got it all: wealth, status, a life of luxury that most folks back then could only dream of. Servants fan her on hot days, poets recite verses at her dinners, and her wardrobe's full of silks imported from distant lands like China or India. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. That luxury, it's a trap, a gilded cage, as I like to call it. As a noblewoman, her world is scripted from birth. Her father picks her husband, maybe some senator's son for political gain. She marries young, pops out heirs to carry the family name, manages the household like a dutiful matron, overseeing slaves, planning dinners, weaving cloth in the afternoons to show her virtue. No vote in the Senate, no say in the laws that govern her. She's property, really. First her father's, then her husband's. Her days blend into one another. Perfumed baths, social calls, sacrifices at the temple to Juno, the goddess of marriage. But power, real agency, that's for the men. She's expected to embody pietas, duty, loyalty, silence. Any deviation, scandal. Can you imagine that grind? Day after day, feeling like a beautiful bird in a cage, admired but trapped? I know I can. I've had my own versions of that feeling. Times when life felt too confined, too prescribed. What would you do in her place? Swallow it down and play the role? Or break free in the most shocking way possible? Valeria chose the break. She rebelled, not with words or whispers, but with action. She signed up for the Ludus, the gladiator school, stepped right into that world of sweat and steel, where men trained to kill or be killed. Not for survival, she didn't need the money. Her family had estates, slaves, gold pouring in from provinces like Gaul or Egypt. No, she did it for something far more intoxicating: infamia. Infamia, that's the Roman term for infamy, the ultimate stain on your reputation. In their society, it was social suicide. It stripped you of rights. No more testifying in court as a witness, no holding public office, no leaving a will that held up in law. Basically, you turned yourself into a non-person legally, outcast from polite society, lumped in with actors, prostitutes, and other lowlifes. But for Valeria, it was liberation. A deliberate screw you to the system that boxed her in. By embracing infamia, she flipped the script. What society saw as shame, she wore as armor. Imagine the scandal, whispers rippling through Rome's high society. Did you hear? Senator's daughter, training with those brutes. Juvenal captures it perfectly in his satires. He mocks women like her mercilessly, describing them lowering themselves to grunt and sweat like common thugs. But under that venom, you sense his outrage. He's not just disgusted, he's threatened. This is why Juvenal was so furious.
He didn't see a warrior. He saw a noblewoman spitting on every value he held dear, the rigid hierarchy where women knew their place. I gotta admit, picturing her there, in the dusty training yard, sun beating down, gripping a wooden sword for the first time, stirs something in me. A mix of sympathy and admiration. Sympathy for the cage that drove her to this, the boredom of endless luxury that gnawed at her soul like rich kids today turning to extreme sports or underground scenes to feel alive. Admiration for the guts it took to shatter it, to trade silk for scars, salons for the sand. In a world where women were expected to be silent pillars of virtue, she chose noise, chaos, the roar of the crowd over the quiet of the villa. But it's bittersweet, isn't it? Her rebellion came at a cost, social exile, maybe even family disownment. And in the arena, one wrong move could end it all. Infamy wasn't just a label, it was a double-edged sword, freeing her while cutting her off from everything she knew. For me, Valeria's not just a rebel from the past, she's a mirror. We all have our cages, expectations from family, society, even ourselves. Hers was marble and tradition. Ours might be subtler, like career paths or cultural norms. But the fight to break free? That's universal. What cages are you rattling right now? Hers teaches us that sometimes the boldest act is to embrace the disgrace and own it.
Now, let's shift to the face that lights me up the most. The one that gave me hope amid all this darkness. The professional. This is where we circle back to Aquileia and Amazonia, not as distant figures on a stone, but as real women hustling in a brutal world. Imagine Aquileia. Maybe she started as a freed slave from the provinces, or a lower-class girl scraping by in Rome's crowded insulae, those rickety apartment blocks stacked high with families, the air thick with cooking smells and street noise. Life's tough. No family fortune, no safety net. She's got skills, though. Strength from labor, a sharp mind from surviving the streets, and the arena? It's her ladder up. Her chance to turn grit into gold. These women didn't stumble into the games. They chose it, or at least chose it as much as anyone in their position could. They signed contracts with the lanista, those shrewd school owners who ran the ludus like cutthroat businesses. Picture the ludus, not some glamorous gym, but a fortified compound on the city's outskirts, more like a prison meets boot camp. Barracks with straw mats for beds, shared latrines, the constant clang of metal on metal from the yard. Mornings kick off at dawn, running laps in the dust till your lungs burn, lifting stone weights to build muscle, sparring with wooden swords under the watchful eyes of trainers who bark orders like drill sergeants. It's grueling. Blisters turning to calluses, bruises blooming daily, the metallic taste of blood from a split lip. Food's basic. Barley porridge, lentils, maybe meat on good days to keep you lean and mean. And the lanista? He's your boss, your owner in a way, taking a cut of your winnings, deciding your fights. Why endure it? For the money, plain and simple. A successful Gladiatrix could rake in fortunes, prizes from sponsors, gifts from adoring fans, even shares of the gate receipts. Some records hint at earnings that dwarfed a legionary's annual pay in just one bout. We're talking life-changing sums, enough to buy your freedom if enslaved, or set up a shop, a farm, even retire as a wealthy woman in a society where most scraped by. Think about their stone again. That relief isn't just art, it's a record of a high-stakes career move. Aquileia versus Amazonia, stage names blazing like neon signs. These weren't one-off spectacles. They were top-tier pros with training regimens that rivaled today's athletes. Contracts might last years, with clauses for food, medical care, crude as it was, herbs for wounds, bones set by brute force, even burial if things went south. You know, this story is my favorite because it's so empowering. It's not about noble rebellion for thrills. It's about hustle, survival with ambition. A woman looking at a man's world and saying, I can play this game and win. Doesn't that feel modern? Like today's entrepreneurs or athletes grinding for that breakthrough, starting from nothing, building a brand, risking it all for the payoff? I picture her after a win, stepping out of the sand, crowd chanting, coins raining down like confetti, her lanista counting the take with a greedy grin. The rush of it, the validation. In a society where women had few careers, maybe midwifery or weaving, here was a path to independence, paved in blood, but leading to freedom. But it was a gamble. Every fight was a roll of the dice. Glory and gold, or a quick end under the thumbs down of the crowd. I gotta admit, digging into this gave me a spark of hope. These pros weren't victims of circumstance, they were architects of their fate, turning the arena's brutality into opportunity. But it wasn't all glory. The risk was real. Every fight a potential last. Still, their story reminds me, even in the darkest arenas, there's room for agency, for building something from nothing. What hustles have you chased in your life? Theirs was steel and sand. Yours might be different, but that drive, it's timeless.
And now, we come to the third face, the darkest one. Friend, I have to be honest with you. When I researched this part, I had to stop multiple times. I'd read a line, feel this weight in my chest, and have to stand up, walk away from the desk, stare into the fire, let the embers blur through tears. It's heavy. It's horrifying. And it's the truth we can't ignore if we're going to honor these women fully. This face isn't about choice or ambition. It's about force. Pure, brutal force. These were the Noxiae, the condemned, prisoners of war dragged from conquered lands like Gaul or Judea, criminals from Rome's underbelly, slaves who rebelled or just drew the short straw. They weren't invited to the arena, they were thrown in, not to fight as equals, but to die as spectacles. Rome loved its games, but the darkest were the reenactments. Sounds harmless, like a historical play, right? But no, these were twisted executions, dressed up in myth to thrill the mob. And damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts, was the cruelest form. It wasn't just thrown to the lions. The Romans turned it into art. They'd build elaborate sets in the arena, fake forests with imported trees, artificial hills, even water features to mimic swamps, all to make the hunt feel real. Picture a female prisoner, maybe a warrior from a distant tribe, her skin marked with faded tattoos, eyes hollow from chains and despair. Her herded into this mock wilderness, no weapons, no armor. Just her, naked or in rags, facing beasts starved for days, lions pacing with hungry growls, bears lumbering with claws like daggers. The crowd, 50,000 strong, from senators in shaded boxes to plebs in the cheap seats, bets on her screams, cheers as fangs tear flesh, blood soaking the sand. Let me paint one for you, as much as it pains me. Take the tale of Pasiphae from Greek legend, the queen cursed to lust after a bull, birthing the Minotaur. In the arena, they'd reenact it, literally. A female prisoner, perhaps captured in a border war, her family slaughtered, her spirit broken by months in dank cells, stripped and tied to a wild bull in the blazing heat of the Colosseum. The beast, enraged by prods and noise, charges across the sand, horns lowered, muscles rippling, dust flying, as 50,000 spectators roar. She has no sword, no shield, just screams lost in the cheers as the bull gores her, tears her apart. Entertainment, they called it, a show. Historians like Cassius Dio whisper about these under emperors like Nero or Commodus, who staged them for kicks. No glory, no draw, just death as spectacle. I remember one night, fire low, reading an account by lamplight. My hands shook. I had to pause, rub my eyes, fight the nausea. Reenactment? It's a euphemism for torture, staged for laughs. What do you feel hearing this? For me, it's a storm, rage at the cruelty, sorrow for the forgotten, but deeper, it's fear. Fear of how humans can be so brutal when allowed, when cruelty is packaged as fun. The crowd's psychology haunts me. What turns 50,000 people, including families, kids, into cheering spectators of horror? Dehumanization, I think. These women were othered, barbarians, criminals, slaves, not real Romans, so their pain didn't count. It's the nightmare beneath Rome's glory, the aqueducts and roads built on broken bodies. These victims remind us, not all gladiatrix chose the sand. Some were dragged onto it, their humanity stripped away. Their stories, anonymous and erased, force us to confront the empire's dark underbelly. And honestly, it makes me question our own world. Where do we still dehumanize others for entertainment or convenience?
So there they are, our three faces, coexisting on the same bloody sand. The rebel, challenging society with her defiance, the professional, hustling for freedom and fortune, and the victim, crushed under the weight of it all. It's a tragedy in 3 acts, isn't it? Each face a mirror to the empire's soul, its ambition, its cruelty, its contradictions. But here's where it gets even stranger. 3 fates, 1 arena, but how did it all unfold? What were the rules of this bizarre circus? And why do the records whisper about women fighting dwarves? The truth is weirder than you think. Join me next time for the spectacle and the shame. Hey there, friend. Welcome back. If you're settling in with me again, pull up that chair by the fire. It's still going, though tonight the flames seem to flicker a little strangely, casting shadows that twist and turn. Maybe grab something warm. This episode has a peculiar chill to it, you know? The kind that sneaks up. Last time, that was heavy, wasn't it? We sat together and met the 3 faces. We empathized with the rebel, cheered for the professional, and we had to pause, facing the horrifying truth of the victim. I left you with a question that sounded almost ridiculous after all that weight. Why do the records whisper about women fighting? Dwarves? It feels bizarre to say it out loud. But the truth is, how they fought reveals just as much as who they were. The arena wasn't just brutal.
It was weird. Welcome to episode 4. Tonight, we dive into the spectacle and the shame. This one's got a morbid curiosity to it, a disbelief that turns into analytical anger. So, let's take it slow, unpack the weirdness together. Ready?
Domitian, night, women and dwarves, laughter, a freak show. Let's jump right into that cliffhanger. Women fighting dwarves. I got to admit, when I first stumbled on that, I thought it was a mistranslation. I double-checked the sources, Cassius Dio, Suetonius, but no, it's there. Picture the scene under emperors like Domitian. He was infamous for his special games. Staged at night under flickering torchlight, the Colosseum bathed in an eerie glow. Domitian loved the bizarre. He wanted novelty, something to shock and amuse. And one of his innovations? Matches between women and dwarves. You can almost hear the announcer's voice. Witness the clash of the extraordinary. A woman, lightly armored, steps into the sand. Opposite her, a dwarf, equipped similarly but comically mismatched. The crowd erupts in laughter. But it's no joke. The fights were real, bloody, often ending in death. Why? That's the question that kept me staring into the fire. It wasn't about sport. It was entertainment, pure and simple. A freak show. Rome was obsessed with hierarchy. Men over women, normal over abnormal. Pairing a woman, seen as lesser than a male warrior, with a dwarf, seen as a curiosity, created this twisted spectacle. The audience loved it because it reinforced their own normality. At least I'm not them, they'd think, laughing as blood spilled.
But it goes deeper. These weren't isolated pranks. They were part of a broader pattern of Venetennese, the beast hunts. Not just women versus dwarves, but elaborate hunts where women, perhaps captured warriors from Germania, were dressed as the goddess Diana, armed with bows to hunt stags in an arena decked out like a forest. Only for the twist, lions released to hunt them back, the crowd roaring as the goddess became the prey. It blurred myth, reality, and violence into one sick performance. The participants dying for the punchline. It wasn't just brutal, it was mocking. A circus where human dignity was the joke.
Now, let's circle back to a detail that's been nagging at us since episode 2. That stone with Achillea and Amazonia, remember? No helmets. When I first noticed it, I thought, artistic choice? But digging deeper, a cynical realization hit me, like uncovering a slick marketing ploy. It wasn't accidental, it was deliberate. Link it back. On that relief, they're geared up, shields, swords, greaves, but no head protection. Why? 2 reasons, each more chilling than the last. First, the product. The whole point of these fights was that they were women. A full helmet would hide that, but barefaced, hair whipping, expressions of pain visible to every spectator, that sold tickets. It mixed violence with voyeurism. Sponsors knew it. They weren't promoting athletes. They were marketing a fantasy. Women in minimal armor, sometimes even bare-breasted, to evoke the mythical Amazons. It was calculated to blend sex and blood. The second reason ties into infama, the infamy we talked about in episode 3. For rebel nobles like Valeria, fighting bareheaded was the ultimate shaming.
In Roman society, elite women were veiled in public. To expose your face and more in the arena, it was a public defilement, a spit in the face of her family. I gotta admit, piecing this together felt like a gut punch. This was marketing at its coldest. They weren't selling skill, they were selling sexuality mixed with violence. And it wasn't just the lack of helmets. Think about their weapons. They were rarely armed like heavy infantry. They were often given exotic or lighter gear, like the Thrax with a curved sword, or the Retiarius with a net and trident. Why? Because it was more performative. It emphasized agility and feminine danger, not brute force. Again, it was marketing. Every choice was designed to maximize the spectacle. So, with these bizarre fights and calculated rules in mind, let's pull back. Why did 50,000 people cheer for this? Remember back in episode 1, The Heart of the Beast, how the arena reinforced social order? This is where it all comes together. Take women fighting dwarves. It inverted natural order, creating a laughable chaos that made spectators feel superior. At least, I'm not that freak, they'd think. The no helmet rule? It amplified voyeurism, turning fights into eroticized shame shows. Why cheer? It was cathartic. Women losing or winning grotesquely reaffirmed Fayu. Nobles degrading themselves boosted commoners' egos. At least, I'm not as decadent as them. It was group therapy. Rome's way of saying, you're normal, they're not. But don't forget the puppet master, the emperor. Staging these wasn't just fun, it was political theater. By featuring a rebel noble bare and battling, he sent a message to the other senators. See, I can humiliate your kin. I control everything, even your honor. It's just as we said in episode 1. The arena was where the emperor performed his absolute power. And these women, they were the perfect pawns in his game. I gotta admit, analyzing this left me with a cold anger. It's not just ancient cruelty, it's calculated manipulation. The crowd cheered because it made them feel powerful, normal, superior. And the emperor, he pulled the strings. It was all a show.
So now we see it. They were superstars, scandals staged as bizarre freak shows. They were a marketing ploy, tools to control the crowd. But as we know, this trend got too popular. Popular enough that Emperor Severus had to step in and ban it. Why? What happens when a freak show becomes a movement? What happens when a sacrifice starts looking like a threat? Join me next time as we witness the final erasure, the Great Eradication.
Hey there, friend. Welcome back. If you're here with me tonight, pull up that chair by the fire. It's burning low now, isn't it? The flames flickering softer, like they're straining to hold on as the night deepens. Maybe pour yourself something comforting. This episode feels like the deepest part of our conversation, where the weight of everything we've uncovered settles in, heavy but necessary. We've come so far together. In episode 4, we unpacked the bizarre, the twisted, the arena as a calculated freak show with no-helmet voyeurism and crowd psychology that left us questioning what drives people to cheer for the grotesque. It was weird, almost morbidly fascinating, a shift from the raw emotion of the three faces. I left you with that pivotal question. What happens when a freak show becomes a threat? We know it did because of Emperor Severus's edict way back in episode 1. tonight, we find out why. This isn't just the end of a trend, it's an eradication, a purge that reshaped history, culture, everything. Welcome to episode 5 of our miniseries, The Veiled Arena. This one's the climax, where all the threads weave together into something profound. It's serious, introspective. Me stringing the clues like a detective closing a case that's weighed on him. So let's take it slow. Let the pieces fall into place. Ready?
Let's begin with the first eraser, the iron fist of the state, clenched by Septimius Severus. To grasp why he banned them, I had to profile him, like a criminal psychologist dissecting a motive. Severus wasn't one of those flamboyant, decadent emperors we met in earlier episodes, like Domitian with his twisted night games or Nero's excesses. No, he was a soldier to his core, practical, disciplined, unforgiving. Born in Leptis Magna, in what's now Libya, he was an outsider to Rome's aristocratic circles, dark-skinned, battle-hardened, with a no-nonsense demeanor shaped by years on the frontier. He didn't inherit the throne, he seized it in the chaos of 193 AD, the year of the 5 emperors, a bloody merry-go-round of civil war, where pretenders rose and fell like dominoes. That year was pure anarchy. Pertinax murdered after 86 days. Didius Julianus buying the throne at auction like some grotesque eBay bid, only to be executed weeks later. Severus won by being ruthless, marching his legions from Pannonia, crushing rivals like Clodius Albinus in brutal battles at Lugdunum, where rivers ran red with Roman blood. He executed dozens of senators he distrusted, purging the elite to consolidate power. This wasn't a pampered palace dweller. This was a general who'd stared down death on dusty battlefields, valuing order above all. When he gazed at the arena, what did he see? Not entertainment, but a festering wound on the empire's body.
Link it back to our 3 faces from episode 3, to Severus, the rebel, the noblewoman like Valeria, defying tradition with her infamia, was a direct insult to the elite class he needed loyal. Why? He was rebuilding a fractured Rome after years of instability. He couldn't afford aristocrats degrading themselves, eroding the social hierarchy that kept the Senate in line. Those women, daughters of senators, spitting on their heritage by brawling in the sand? It was evidence the upper crust had gone soft, lost control, a perfect pretext for him to tighten his grip, perhaps executing more disloyal nobles under the guise of moral reform. The professional hustling for fame like Achillea, she represented unchecked ambition, blurring class lines and turning the games from state-controlled ritual to a chaotic free-for-all. Too unpredictable for a man who valued ranks and obedience, where every soldier knew their place. And the victim, mangled in those horrific reenactments, even that symbolized decay, cheapening death from honorable sacrifice to lurid show, dulling the martial spirit his troops needed to hold the frontiers against barbarians. But tie it to episode 4's freak shows. Severus saw the no-helmet voyeurism, the women versus dwarves absurdity, as moral corrosion eating at Rome's core. In his soldiers' mind, this wasn't harmless diversion, it was dangerous subversion. An empire runs on virtus, masculine virtue, discipline, honor. Women in the arena mocked that, inverting gender roles and fostering effeminacy among the elite. What if his legions, fresh from crushing Parthian foes or quelling British revolts, returned to see noble ladies brawling barefaced? It undermined authority, sowed doubt about Rome's strength. For a general like him, raised on the frontier where order meant survival, where a disorganized camp could mean massacre, this was a threat to the empire's very foundations.
A rotting core can't support the legions holding the borders against the gathering storms of invasion. I gotta admit, profiling Severus felt like dissecting a crime scene. Cold, methodical, piecing together his worldview from fragments of history. His edict in 200 AD wasn't born of moral outrage alone, it was political calculus. He was a commander cleaning house, excising what he saw as gangrene before it spread. Women warriors symbolized the chaos he despised, the same chaos that nearly toppled the throne before him, the infighting that left Rome vulnerable. And if you can't command something, you outlaw it, stamp it out before it festers. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many bans throughout history, or even today, are really about preserving order over allowing freedom? Severus's hand was steady, but it crushed more than games. It crushed a symbol of defiance that challenged the very structure he fought to uphold.
But Severus was just a soldier. He could ban an act, but he couldn't kill an idea. What came next? That's the real death blow. It's a new story, a new god rising from the ashes of the old, reshaping not just laws, but souls. The empire was transforming, you see. By the early 4th century, under Constantine, the first Christian emperor, Rome was shifting gears in ways that echoed across centuries. Christianity, once a fringe sect from Judea, was spreading like wildfire. Through slaves whispering psalms in kitchens, soldiers converting in barracks after visions on the battlefield, even elites in villas debating its tenets over wine. It brought a profound value flip. From the pagan virtus, masculine strength, public glory, conquest through blood, to Christian humilitas, humility, inner faith, salvation through suffering and grace. The old gods of power, Mars with his spear, Jupiter thundering from Olympus, faded before a crucified savior, preaching, "Blessed are the meek, turn the other cheek." This wasn't just religion. It was a cultural revolution, redefining what it meant to be heroic, especially for women. And here's what floored me. The final battle for the soul of Roman womanhood unfolded right in that same blood-soaked arena we know so well. Two heroines collided. The old pagan icon, the Gladiatrix, celebrated for her physical prowess, her defiance against norms, her skill in killing, her body boldly displayed through infamia. She embodied the arena's raw ethos: fight back, survive, thrill the masses with strength and spectacle. Now, the new Christian paragon, the female martyr. Think of saints like Perpetua, thrown to beasts in 203 AD, ironically under Severus's watch, just years after his edict. Perpetua wasn't a faceless victim. Her story survives in her own words, a diary smuggled from prison. A 22-year-old noble from Carthage, well-educated, with a newborn son still nursing. Her pagan father begged her to renounce her faith, on his knees, kissing her feet, tears streaming as he pleaded for her life and the family's honor. "Think of your child," he wept. She refused, her resolve unyielding.
In the arena at Carthage, smaller than the Colosseum, but no less terrifying, the reenactment began. Tied with fellow martyrs, she faced a mad heifer, a cruel mockery for a young mother, the beast's udders swollen as if to taunt her motherhood. The animal charged, goring her side, tossing her like a rag doll. Her tunic tore in the chaos, exposing her. But even dazed, she covered herself, for modesty's sake, preserving dignity in death's face. She helped a fallen companion rise, whispering comfort amid the roars. When the inexperienced gladiator fumbled his sword strike, trembling at her calm gaze, Perpetua grasped his hand and guided the blade to her own throat. Her last act? Control in surrender. You see the total inversion? It gave me chills, like witnessing a cultural earthquake in slow motion. the ground shifting under everything we'd uncovered. In this emerging world, the Gladiatrix's strength became monstrous, defiant, shameful, a relic of pagan excess and moral decay. But the martyr's weakness, holy, humble, a virtue to emulate. The rebels' challenge against authority was sin, a threat to the new order of submission to God and church. The martyr's quiet acceptance, salvation, a model for all women. Endure suffering with faith, find power in passivity. Christianity didn't just frown on the games, it redefined heroism. No more bare-breasted Amazons flaunting power, now veiled virgins and suffering saints embodying piety, their bodies covered, their spirits exalted. I got to admit, this realization felt profound, like connecting dots across a vast canvas, seeing how one idea topples another. Severus delivered the political strike, banning the act to restore order amid civil war's scars. But Christianity sealed the cultural fate, overwriting womanhood itself. What do you think? Did Christianity elevate women by emphasizing spirit over body? Or did it redefine their chains, trading one cage for another? For me, it's bittersweet. Progress in valuing inner strength, but a loss of the bold physical agency the Gladiatrix represented. The old heroine fought the world, the new surrendered to a higher power. And in that shift, the Gladiatrix was eclipsed, her defiance recast as vice.
And so, the final nail in the coffin. By 404 AD, under Emperor Honorius, a devout Christian, clinging to a crumbling throne, the games were banned outright, the doors slamming shut on centuries of spectacle. Why the death knell? Christianity's rise made blood sports incompatible with "thou shalt not kill." Martyrs like Perpetua showed suffering as a holy path, not public amusement, turning the arena from glory pit to sin den. But it wasn't just piety. Rome was broke and besieged. The empire teetered. Visigoths under Alaric sacking cities, Vandals raiding coasts, the treasury drained by endless wars. Games cost fortunes. Exotic beasts shipped from Africa's savannas or Asia's jungles, arenas repaired after earthquakes, crowds placated with free grain to prevent riots. When your capital's under siege, splurging millions of sesterces on lion imports isn't just expensive, it's madness. There's a legend that captures the end. Saint Telemachus, a humble monk from the East. In 404 AD, he leapt into the arena mid-fight, arms raised to halt the violence. "In the name of Christ, stop this barbarity," he cried. The crowd, furious at the interruption, pelted him with stones until he lay broken. Honorius, horrified by this martyrdom, issued the final ban. True or not, it symbolizes the tide turning. The mob might still crave blood, but political and religious power sided against it. I imagine the last games. Sparse crowds in a weathered coliseum, echoes thin as the empire itself. Ludus doors bolted, trainers scattering to farms or legions, the sand unstained for the first time in generations. And the Gladiatrix faded into silence, her whisper buried under a new god's roar.
So there it is, the answer. Severus with his political axe, striking at chaos. Christianity with its cultural rewrite, redefining heroism and womanhood. They vanished, erased, buried for 1,600 years. So, why are we talking about them now? What's their legacy? If they were so thoroughly defeated,
Did they really lose? Or do the ghosts of Aquileia and Amazonia linger in us? Join me next time for our final journey, Episode 6, Echoes in the Sand.
Hey there, friend. Welcome back for our final journey together. If you're here with me one last time, pull up that chair a little closer, won't you? The fire's burning low now, just a bed of glowing embers casting a soft, fading light. We've come such a long way, haven't we? From whispers in the dark to faces in the sand. It's been quite the ride. I can almost feel the quiet settling in, like the end of a good, deep conversation that leaves you thinking long after the words stop. Let's think back for a moment. We started with just a whisper, a forbidding edict from an emperor long gone. In Episode 1, we hunted for evidence, and we found them, etched in stone, like secrets waiting to be read. In Episode 2, we met the three faces, the rebel defying her cage, the professional hustling for her freedom, and the victim crushed by the machine. We saw them twisted into a bizarre spectacle, marketed like freaks for the crowd's amusement in Episode 4. And last time, we witnessed their erasure by a new world order, a double blow from politics and philosophy. I left you with that lingering question. If they were buried for 1,600 years, did they really lose? Tonight we chase the answer. We hunt for their legacy. Welcome to Episode 6 of our mini-series, The Veiled Arena, Echoes in the Sand. This is our farewell, so let's make it count. Reflective, profound, with a touch of that bittersweet warmth as the fire fades. Ready to listen for the echoes? They were waiting. They went silent for so long. Just think about that for a second. Over a millennium and a half. The Colosseum, once roaring with crowds, crumbled into a quarry for medieval builders, then a fortress for warring families in the Renaissance. Empires rose and fell, the Byzantine, the Holy Roman, the Ottoman. The Middle Ages came and went with knights in armor jousting in tournaments that echoed the old games, but forgot the women who fought first. The Renaissance revived classical art, scholars poring over Virgil and Cicero. But the Gladiatrix? She stayed buried, her name unspoken, her story lost in the dust. You know, that silence hits me hard. Imagine it. Generations upon generations living without a whisper of Aquileia or Amazonia. No paintings, no poems, no plays, just nothing. The arena became a romantic ruin, overgrown with weeds, a backdrop for poets like Byron musing on fallen glory. But the women? Erased so thoroughly that even when archaeologists started digging in the 18th century, unearthing Pompeii's ash-covered streets or the Forum's marble fragments, they didn't see her. They saw male gladiators, the Spartacus legends, but the female faces? Overlooked. Dismissed as anomalies or myths. So how did we find them again? It wasn't a big eureka moment like Howard Carter bursting into Tutankhamun's tomb with a flashlight. No, it was the quiet work of scholars and curators over the last 200 years. It was a museum curator in London, remember that stone from Episode 2? Dusting off a slab from Turkey and really looking at it, peering past assumptions and asking, hold on, this isn't a man, this is a woman. That slab from Halicarnassus, shipped to the British Museum in the 19th century, amid the frenzy of European excavation, sat quietly for decades.
But in the 20th century, as historians revisited Roman texts with fresh eyes, feminism rising, questioning male-dominated narratives, they saw the patterns. The Edict from Severus, Episode 1, suddenly clicked as evidence, not footnote. Juvenal's rants, Episode 2, weren't just satire, they were confessions. I gotta admit, that rediscovery gives me goosebumps. They were waiting, buried but not gone. And we were finally ready to listen, thanks to waves of change. The Enlightenment sparked curiosity about the ancients. The 19th century digs in Pompeii uncovered mosaics hinting at female fighters. Then the 20th century, world wars shattered old orders. Women's rights movements echoed the rebels' defiance. Scholars like Kathleen Coleman or Amy Richland pored over fragments, piecing together the puzzle. By the 21st century, with digital archives and gender studies, the whispers became voices. Books like Gladiatrix by Amy Zoll emerged. Exhibitions featured their artifacts. What strikes me most, it's not dramatic, it's persistent. Quiet persistence winning over loud erasure. They waded through dark ages, through plagues and invasions, until we evolved enough to hear them. And personally, it fills me with awe, like an archaeologist brushing dirt from a long-lost relic. Their rediscovery isn't just academic, it's a resurrection. A reminder that truth, buried deep, can surface when the time's right. What echoes have you rediscovered in your life? For me, this series has been one, unearthing strength in forgotten places.
Their legacy? Where is it? Honestly, it's everywhere. Just turn on your TV, flip open a comic, or scroll through social media. We're surrounded by it, even if we don't always connect the dots. You know, in the 21st century, we're obsessed with the warrior woman. She's the star of our stories, our screens, our imaginations. Take Xena, warrior princess. Leather armor, chakrams flying, battling warlords with fierce independence. Or Ellen Ripley in Alien, blue-collared hero, flamethrower in hand, facing down horrors in space with grit and smarts. Sarah Connor in Terminator, transforming from waitress to muscle-bound survivor, teaching us resilience. Brienne of Tarth in Game of Thrones, tall, armored, sword sworn to honor, defying every gender norm. And of course, Wonder Woman, lasso of truth, bullet-deflecting bracelets, born from Amazons. I got to admit, realizing this hit me like a wave. We consume these tales voraciously. Blockbusters grossing billions, fan art flooding the internet, cosplayers embodying them at conventions. We crave stories of strong women wielding weapons, deciding their fates, breaking chains. But here's the thing that stopped me cold. We call it fantasy. We pat ourselves on the back for being progressive. We think we've invented the heroine. But we forget Achillea and Amazonia. They were real. They did it 2,000 years ago, in blood and sand, without scripts or special effects. That echo is obvious once you listen. Our modern icons are reincarnations. Xena's chakram echoes the Gladiatrix's net and trident. Ripley's survival mirrors the professional's hustle in the ludus. Wonder Woman's Amazon roots, straight from the stage names carved in stone. We're not creating, we're rediscovering. And why now? Society's shifting, women's rights, #MeToo, barriers crumbling. We're ready to celebrate what Rome buried. It gives me hope, you know? Their defiance lives on, repackaged for our time. But it's bittersweet. We romanticize them as fiction, forgetting the real cost, the infamia, the erasure. Still, that they're back, it means the whispers won.
But swords and capes are just the surface. That's the obvious echo.
the one we see in lights and screens. The real legacy, the hidden echo, it's deeper, more profound, and it lives inside us. For me, the hidden truth of this whole series is that the Gladiatrix isn't just a fighter. She's a symbol, a mirror to the human experience, especially for women, but honestly, for anyone who's ever felt boxed in or erased. Let's connect it back to our 3 faces from episode 3, because that's where the true resonance lies. First, the rebel's spirit. That's Valeria's fire, the defiance against cages. It's alive in anyone who's ever been told, "You can't do that," and did it anyway. Think of the first woman to apply to medical school, facing down deans who laughed her out, or the first female presidential candidate, shattering glass ceilings amid jeers, the artist bucking trends, the entrepreneur starting from scratch in a male-dominated field. Anyone refusing the box society builds for them, whether gender, race, class. I see her echo in movements like suffrage or civil rights, where rebels risk infamia for change. Personally, it resonates with my own small rebellions, times I pushed against expectations, embracing the disgrace to find authenticity. What about you? Where have you rattled your cage? Then the professional's hustle. That's Achillea's grit, the drive to build from nothing. It's in every woman working twice as hard for half the recognition. The equal pay fights, the boardroom battles, the gig economy warriors piecing together livelihoods. It's the athlete training through pain for that podium spot, the coder breaking into tech despite biases. In a world still tilted, her echo is the quiet persistence. I know my worth, and I'll fight for it. It gives me hope. Her ludus echoes in modern hustle culture, where underdogs turn risk into reward. I've felt it in my own path, grinding through late nights to chase stories like this. Her legacy? Proving agency exists even in rigged games. And yes, even the victim shadow lingers. That's the reminder of the cost, the dehumanized, turned into spectacles for entertainment. It's a warning. Speak up for the voiceless, the othered in our midst. In today's world, it's the immigrant scapegoated, the marginalized turned into memes or headlines for clicks. It asks that uncomfortable question: what's our modern freak show? Reality TV exploiting pain, social media shaming, viral videos of suffering for likes. Her echo urges us to humanize, to reject the props in our spectacles. For me, it's a gut check. How often do we consume cruelty disguised as fun? Her legacy is vigilance, ensuring history's horrors don't repeat. That's the hidden truth. They weren't just warriors, they were us. Their echoes whisper through time, challenging us to rebel against cages, hustle for worth, and protect the vulnerable, buried but unbreakable.
So, did they really lose? I don't think so. They were silenced, yes, buried deep. But 2,000 years later, you and I, we're sitting here by this fading fire, and we're calling their names. Achillea, Amazonia, Mevia, Perpetua. We're telling their story. And that alone, they've won. The echoes survived.
The fire's just embers now. Our journey, my friend, is done. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I loved sharing it with you. Thank you for sitting with me. Thank you for listening. Now, as the last light flickers out, sleep well and listen. Listen for the echoes in the sand